Marcus landed on Nereid 7, with the sort of cautious optimism that soldiers learn to carry in one hand while gripping a blaster in the other. The shuttle hissed and shivered as it touched the purple-hued soil, sending small dust clouds swirling around his boots. He squinted through the visor of his helmet, trying to adjust to the faint green-tinged sky that seemed to bend light in strange angles. "Well," he muttered to himself, "either this place is abandoned or someone's really into abstract landscaping." He stepped off the shuttle, tripping over a coil of strange, semi-transparent vines that gave a soft squeak when crushed. "Great start," he said, dusting himself off. "Alien plant life already hates me." The reconnaissance assignment had been simple on paper. Scan abandoned colonies, check for rogue AI activity, report findings. In practice, it involved navigating ruins that looked more like alien art installations than functional habitats. Marcus wandered through streets of crystalline structures that shimmered when touched by the dim sunlight, giving the impression that the city was alive and sneezing in slow motion. He made a mental note to avoid touching anything else without gloves. Something about the way the buildings shifted ever so slightly under his gaze made him uneasy. Or maybe it was just the caffeine withdrawal talking. He stumbled upon a tower that hadn't budged in centuries, its smooth metal walls reflecting the sky like a mirror. A soft humming emanated from inside, rhythmic, almost musical. Marcus frowned. "Either I found the intergalactic spa, or trouble has a new address." He tried the door, which responded to his touch with a holographic keypad that buzzed with alien symbols. He pressed a few random buttons, muttering, "Yep, definitely guessing on this one." The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast hall that smelled faintly of ozone and old machinery. The interior was lined with suspended platforms and floating orbs of light that rotated lazily in midair. Marcus tripped over one of the orbs, landing face first and letting out a startled yelp. "I swear I'm not usually this graceful," he said, rising and dusting himself off, earning an empty echo as a sarcastic applause from the hall. Then he saw her. She sat on a raised platform in the center of the hall, tall and unnervingly still. Her skin had the faint warmth of sunlight on sand, her hair dark and flowing, and her long ears stretched elegantly back, catching the dim light like delicate blades. Her eyes were impossibly large, luminous and deep, and they seemed to measure him, calculating, holding the weight of centuries. Marcus felt the usual bravado of a soldier evaporate in an instant. He cleared his throat and waved awkwardly. Hello. Do you give guided tour?" No response. He tried again. "I come bearing snacks from Earth." "Well, snacks-ish. Mostly granola bars and questionable jerky." Still nothing. Marcus sighed and muttered, "Great. Ignored by an alien. I feel so understood." He wandered closer, making sure not to trip over the floating orbs again. Each step made a soft chime, as if the hall itself were protesting his intrusion. "Seriously," he said, crouching near the edge of her platform, "you've been alone here a long time, right? Must get boring." He flicked a small rock, which hovered briefly before drifting off into the far corner. "I mean, I know how it feels. I talk to plants sometimes, and they talk back by wilting dramatically." He paused, glancing at her, half expecting her to scold him telepathically. No such luck. Marcus poked around the hall, touching panels and accidentally activating holographic recordings of her past. He winced as one projection flickered to life, showing her moving gracefully, interacting with machinery, and occasionally laughing in ways that made Marcus realize she had been full of life once. He winced again when a small drone buzzed to life and promptly began chasing him, as if taking offense at his clumsy curiosity. "Oh, you want to play? Fine, I'm terrible at this anyway." He shouted, weaving around floating platforms, tripping more than once, until the drone finally hovered behind him, silent but judging. After a while, he sank onto a platform opposite her, brushing dust off his uniform. "Look, I'm no hero," he said, leaning back with a grin, "but I've been told I'm excellent at making awkward first impressions. Honestly, it's a gift." He chuckled at his own joke, and for a moment something shifted in her eyes, a faint, imperceptible glimmer, as if the light had finally decided to touch her. Marcus noticed it and felt a small spark of triumph. "Hey, I'll take it," he whispered. "A smile might come tomorrow, or the day after, or, whenever." Hours passed with Marcus wandering the hall, narrating ridiculous stories about Earth politics, bad space cuisine, and his infamous attempt at zero-gravity combat training. She remained silent, but he noticed tiny gestures. A slight tilt of her head, the faint twitch of her long ears, a shimmer in her gaze whenever one of his stories landed just right. By the time the twin moons of Nereid 7 rose above the horizon, bathing the hall in soft blue light, Marcus was sprawled on the floor, exhausted but strangely elated. "I'm telling you," he whispered to her, "humans are the masters of awkward charm, you'll see. One day you might even laugh at me, and I'll be ready." He leaned back against a floating pillar, staring up at her luminous eyes, and felt a quiet sense of connection, fragile, tentative, but undeniable. Somewhere deep inside, he sensed that her long years of solitude might finally be coming to an end, and that perhaps, through all his clumsy jokes and ridiculous antics, he was beginning to awaken something long buried inside her. And somewhere in that still, humming hall, Marcus imagined the faintest hint of a smile forming, just on the edges of her lips. Marcus returned the next day, boots crunching on the purple dust, his uniform streaked with yesterday's grime, and a stubborn streak of space green paint he was sure would never come out. "Okay, day 2, he muttered. "Operation Make Alien Smile continues." The hall was just as silent as before, but now Marcus noticed the faint flicker of a holographic orb hovering near her platform, shifting in delicate patterns as if testing him. "Oh, so we're playing the weird light game today, huh? Challenge accepted." He tripped over a floating cable, muttering under his breath, "Seriously, who designed this place? Zero gravity, sentient floors, and lethal decoration choices. This is worse than obstacle course training day back on Earth." She watched him, still silent, but the faintest twitch of her long ears betrayed her attention. Marcus grinned. "Yes, you're noticing me. Take that, centuries of solitude." He brought out a small pouch of what he called space snacks, which were mostly dehydrated protein bars, and one questionable candy that fizzed on contact with air. "These are from Earth," he explained to her, waving a bar in the air. "Try one, I promise they're edible. Well, most of them are. Warning, may cause hallucinations or mild existential dread." He tossed one toward her. She didn't move, but the orb shifted and gently nudged it back toward him. Marcus laughed. "Ah, playing hard to get with food, classic." Marcus spent the morning wandering the hall, examining panels, pressing buttons, and accidentally activating a holographic map of the city that projected floating blueprints above their heads. "Look at this," he said, pointing at a section that glowed intensely. "Either this is where someone hid treasure, or they really liked geometrically confusing buildings. I vote treasure." She tilted her head and stepped closer to the projection, her long ears twitching. Marcus noticed her reflection in the holographic light. For the first time, her posture relaxed slightly, and her eyes followed his movements, curious rather than guarded. "Victory," he whispered. "Small victory, but I'll take it." He tried teaching her simple games, tossing floating orbs and suggesting a sort of alien catch. His throws were erratic. Orbs zipped past her, hovered too high, or collided softly with the walls. "Okay, maybe not catch," he admitted, laughing, "but you have to admit it's entertaining." A small laugh escaped her throat, barely audible, like the flutter of wings. Marcus stopped mid-gesture, staring at her. "Wait, did you just—" "Yes, that counts as laughter," he bowed theatrically. "I humbly accept your amusement, medal or applause, your choice." Over the next few hours, Marcus explored her daily routines and little quirks. He noticed she preferred moving her hands slowly through floating holographic spheres, arranging them in patterns that pulsed with soft light. "You're basically painting with physics," he joked. "I didn't know I was dating a light artist. Do you take commissions? Can I pay in granola bars? She glanced at him, and the corners of her mouth quirked upward for the first real, deliberate time. Marcus clapped his hands together, startling a hovering drone that zoomed around like a caffeinated insect. Yes, that's progress. Smiling, laughing, art. Your resume is impressive. Marcus discovered that her long ears were not only delicate but highly sensitive to the environment, picking up vibrations and signals he couldn't perceive. So, he said, leaning against a floating pillar, you're like a biological antenna with an art degree. Cool, I'm officially jealous. She tilted her head, her ears twitching, and for a fleeting moment Marcus swore he saw a playful spark in her eyes. As they experimented with games and stories, Marcus realized she was beginning to share her world with him. She guided his clumsy hands to adjust floating platforms, creating delicate pathways and levitating bridges. When he stumbled, she didn't scold him. Instead, she gently nudged him with a fingertip, the softest touch, and he nearly lost his balance entirely. Okay, I see how it is, he laughed, regaining his footing. You're teaching me physics and humility at the same time. Impressive multitasking. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had set up a series of improvised games using the hall's floating objects. Levitating obstacle courses, racing light spheres, and a dangerously unstable tower of holographic blocks that he swore would collapse in the next second. She participated, guiding him, laughing softly, and occasionally tossing an orb to knock him off balance. Marcus flailed dramatically, pretending to be defeated, and she responded with a bright, genuine laugh that echoed across the hall like music. I have a feeling, Marcus said, sitting on the floor and catching his breath. This is going to be my favorite planet. Ever sorry, Earth. As evening approached, Marcus collapsed on one of the levitating platforms, staring at her glowing eyes and the soft twitches of her ears. You know, he said, more seriously now, humans are always this charming or clumsy, but apparently it works on centuries-old, emotionally suppressed aliens. Who knew? She tilted her head, her gaze softening, and nudged one of the floating orbs toward him, a silent gesture of connection. He caught it clumsily. Yes, he whispered, that's trust, that's progress. The hall hummed around them, floating lights drifting lazily, casting delicate patterns on their faces. Marcus realized that, in the midst of clumsy jokes, ridiculous games, and improbable mishaps, something profound was happening. She was awakening, not fully, not yet, but enough for laughter to escape, for curiosity to bloom, and for connection to root itself in centuries of silence. He grinned, brushing dust off his sleeves. Day 2, he said, success. I made an alien laugh. Tomorrow we aim for a full smile, maybe even an eye roll at my terrible jokes. And as the twin moons rose, bathing the hall in soft silver light, Marcus noticed the faintest, most subtle curve at the edge of her lips. He whispered to himself, one step closer. The soft chime of a floating orb punctuated the moment, and for the first time the silence of centuries felt less like emptiness and more like a space waiting to be filled with laughter, light, and unexpectedly human charm. Marcus pushed open the hall's doors, boots bouncing on the low-gravity floor, and immediately collided with one of the floating holographic orbs, sending it careening toward a corner where it blinked angrily before wobbling back into position. Still can't aim, he muttered, dusting off. Some things never change. Ilara was waiting on her platform, sitting with the serene elegance of a statue that had just learned to hum. But this time her long ears twitched in anticipation, her eyes sparkling with curiosity rather than calculation. Marcus grinned. Well, good morning, Madam Antenna. Ready to teach me more advanced forms of light juggling today? She tilted her head and raised an eyebrow, or at least he assumed it was an eyebrow in the human sense. She reached out, and a small orb floated from her hand into his, glowing with gentle energy. He caught it, stumbling slightly. Right, okay, balance. Gravity is my mortal enemy today, he muttered, earning a soft chuckle from her which Marcus immediately pretended to swoon from. Ah, your laugh, it's like music, I swear. I might retire just to hear it full time. She rolled her eyes, or at least gave the closest thing to it, and the orb zipped from his hands back to hers as if mocking him. Yep, he said. I think you're learning sarcasm. Dangerous. As the hours passed, Marcus realized she had begun actively experimenting with her emotions. She created light spheres that danced around him in playful patterns, teasing him into running, jumping, and occasionally diving to catch them, all while maintaining an elegant rhythm he couldn't hope to mimic. Seriously, he panted after missing yet another orb, you're a physics teacher, a comedian, and apparently a sadistic trainer all in one package. I'm impressed. She laughed, the sound resonating in the hall, bouncing off the floating platforms in soft, musical arcs. He noticed she was more than just participating. She was enjoying herself, connecting, and testing the boundaries of her emotions. Marcus decided to push things further. All right, he said, adopting the most serious military tone he could muster, which was undermined instantly by a stray floating orb smacking him in the shoulder. Today we attempt something highly dangerous. Cooperative levitation acrobatics. He waved his hands dramatically, directing two orbs to hover beside them. She raised an eyebrow, considered the challenge, and moved her hands in a swift motion that made the orbs spin in perfect synchrony. Okay, he whispered, eyes wide. I might have just summoned a small miracle. Their play soon led to conversation, small at first, fragmented words, gestures, and finally audible sentences. Marcus learned that Alara had been a guardian of knowledge, isolated because of political upheaval in her civilization. She had suppressed emotions to survive, yet she had longed for connection all those years. Marcus shared his own life, ridiculous misadventures in training, earth politics, and failed attempts at culinary experiments in zero-gravity kitchens. They laughed together, and every joke, every teasing comment chipped away the wall she had built around herself. Late in the afternoon, a sudden tremor shook the hall. A malfunction in the central hub caused floating platforms to spin and drift dangerously. Marcus grabbed an orb, trying to stabilize it, and shouted, I got this. Probably. Maybe. Definitely not dying today. He lunged for a tilting platform just as Alara leaped gracefully beside him, her long ears flicking as she extended her hand. Trust me, she said softly, and in that instant Marcus realized how much he had changed. He no longer approached this alien world as an intruder, but as a partner, someone who shared in her life and experiences. Together, they navigated the chaotic platforms, coordinating their movements in perfect, if improvisational, harmony. Marcus's usual clumsiness collided with Alara's elegance, creating moments of unintentional humor. He nearly fell twice, earning peals of laughter from her, and one time he swung an orb so wildly it knocked a drone into the air. Good catch, she exclaimed, genuinely amused. Marcus grinned, panting. I am the master of controlled chaos, he said, bowing theatrically in midair. After the tremor subsided, they collapsed on the largest platform, hovering above the softly glowing hall. Marcus looked at her, noticing the radiant smile he had been working toward for weeks. Her long ears flicked playfully, and her eyes, once pools of sorrow, now reflected amusement, warmth, and a spark of trust. You know, he said, letting his voice drop to a soft tone, I didn't expect to learn anything important on this mission. Turns out I was wrong. You taught me patience, joy, and apparently how to survive zero-gravity slapstick. She laughed, a sound that reverberated like chimes through the hall. I taught you, she asked, her tone teasing but sincere. I learned, Marcus corrected, smiling. I learned that even someone isolated for centuries can open up, and that humans, clumsy, ridiculous humans, can sometimes make a difference without even meaning to. She regarded him, and for a moment no words were needed. The hall, the orbs, the floating platforms, they all seemed to pause, honoring the quiet intimacy between them. The twin moons of Nereid 7 rose, bathing the hall in silver and violet light. Marcus stretched his arms, leaning back against a pillar. Well, he he said. Mission complete. Alien smiles restored, chaos administered, ego moderately inflated. I consider that a job well done. Alara's smile deepened, ears flicking with amusement, and she nudged a light orb toward him. He caught it effortlessly this time, a small symbol of the harmony they had built. As the night settled, Marcus realized that he had changed profoundly. He had arrived expecting an empty hall, maybe a lonely ghost of a civilization, and found instead a friend, a partner, and a being capable of immense joy. He had learned to be patient, to embrace absurdity, and to understand the subtle rhythms of someone who had long forgotten laughter. In return, he had given her something simple yet monumental: connection. He stood and extended a hand toward her. "Shall we continue tomorrow?" he asked. She placed her hand in his, the gesture simple, perfect, and complete.